Mr. Davis,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr.
I'm
Vine,
sorry, here.
Mr. Vine,
Here.
Mr. Brennan.
Present.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis, would you like me to read in for the record the first committee discussion item?
Well, yeah, Daniel noted that it's a sort of a follow-up from the first meeting. I don't know if you need to do a full recap, but that would help move forward.
Okay, and the first item is actually the referral that Mr. Brennan made on development review process and efficiencies to be led by Krista and Dana Higgins. Ms. Krista Hampton, Director of Planning and Development Services, and Ms. Dana Higgins, Director of Engineering.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning, Krista.
All right, yes, Dana Higgins and I are here to have a review of the development review process and some efficiencies today. So we're looking forward to this discussion. Overview of the agenda we will discuss the participants in development review, applicable codes and regulations, and an overview of the process. Finally, we'll go over opportunities for efficiencies and improvements and open it up for questions. The development review process in Columbia includes a broad array of activities, from renovating a bathroom, subdividing a parcel, constructing a mixed-use building, and a great deal more. The process involves comprehensive reviews by numerous city and non-city agencies. Every project is unique and subject to its own requirements depending on the location and complexities. And the development review process and the professional staff who manage it is in place to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So the presentation is intended to provide an overview of the development process in the City of Columbia. And we are involved in it day to day. We often forget that many, if not most people, may know a small part of the process, but not familiar with all of the possible steps. And this is by no means a comprehensive list. For instance, we're not touching on annexation or some of the other ancillary parts of the process, but it will provide a basic review of the process. So let's dig in, talking about the participants in the development review. They encompass much of the city, not listed here, but also involved through some part is the legal department, the city clerk, and then there are also support agencies who support our employees. But you all are mostly familiar with zoning, planning, engineering, public safety. You have fire and police who are involved in the process, utilities, business license, public works, as well as parking. And these staff administer a wide range of ordinances, rules, and regulations to include a comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, engineering regulations, building codes, the fire code, addressing, and the Columbia Code of Ordinances. And then there are outside state laws and regulations as well. So we'll touch on some of these a little bit more to let you know what they actually cover. And the first we'll discuss is the zoning and subdivision ordinance. And the subdivision ordinance, some of you may know that as the land development ordinance. Zoning regulates the use, height, area, landscape, signage, and a great deal more. The subdivision ordinance, which is currently directly adjacent to, but in our new code is unified, which is why we call it the Unified Development Ordinance. It sets out the requirements for the subdivision of land, group, commercial, and residential developments. That's such things as a shopping center or maybe an apartment development. And it coordinates with the engineering regulations with regard to infrastructure, such as roads, connectivity, and that kind of thing. Also in the zoning ordinance are the standards for architectural review, both historic and urban design.
Thanks, Krista. With engineering, we cover water and sewer, roads and sidewalks, stormwater, grease traps, and floodplain. Within our regulations, we spell out the construction and design criteria for our water and sewer system. We also have a process in place where we are able to evaluate flows for sewer to make sure that downstream capacity is there. And we also spell out our hydrant flow test and what we expect. For roads and sidewalks, we work with Public Works and make sure that the roads are designed according to our standards as well as the sidewalks. And our stormwater, we have our own MS4, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, which was granted to us back in 2010, and we review all of the land disturbance over 5,000 square feet. We review both pre and post development, as well as look at erosion control and water quality. If there is a use for food preparation or automobiles are involved, it will initiate a grease trap review where it'll go through our utilities group and they'll work with the developers to see what capacity is needed. And if it is in a parcel is in the floodplain, our floodplain manager will get involved. If the development occurs in the floodplain, there could be an elevation certificate required. Or if there's no development in the floodplain, the parcel is just located there, it's automatically approved. So
we also have building and fire codes. The building codes include building, mechanical, plumbing, electric, and gas, and these are mandated by state law. The fire code includes fire prevention regulations and life safety, such as installing sprinklers, fire alarms, etc. And often those are mandated by state law as well. In addition, South Carolina has passed several additional laws that must be administered by local jurisdictions, such as regulations regarding energy, swimming pools, and accessibility. So in addition to the city review team, there are numerous outside agencies that may be involved in a project, depending on the scope and the location. These include, but are not limited to, the Department of Transportation, South Carolina DHEC, the Aeronautics Commission, the Richland County Assessor's Office, the Register of Deeds, and the South Carolina Fire Marshal. So now that we've discussed the people involved and the staff involved, we want to talk about the basic development process. And as I mentioned earlier, a project may involve one or all of these steps. I will highlight the whole process and then we will dig into each one. So at first you have the concept and research of the project, which then leads to hopefully a pre-application meeting. If needed, a planning and zoning board may be involved in land development plan review. You then lead, so this is the horizontal, you review the land disturbance permit is issued to move dirt, install utilities, and then you come out of the ground with a building plan review and a permit. We then inspect those improvements and get you to a business license and occupancy. Those are the basic steps. Let's dig in. The first step of every project, we hope, no matter the scope, should be research. You research the site constraints, try to understand the zoning and land development regulations. Very important to verify utility, not only if it's available, but the capacity. And there is a pre-cap program available that is non-binding. You want to verify that the use is permitted. It sounds basic, but it's pretty important. Identify existing and needed conditions such as utilities, or is there stormwater needs? And then we hope that you will schedule a pre-application meeting with the Development Center. This is a terrific service we provide where the project can be reviewed in concept and valuable feedback obtained at the beginning when it's most easily incorporated for both the city and the developer. So once the project concept is developed, depending on the scope and use, it may require review from one of the city's land use boards, and they each have a different role. I think you all are very familiar with the Planning Commission. They act in a decision-making capacity on site plans and subdivision reviews. So once a project meets a certain threshold, it goes to the Planning Commission for these reviews, as well as street names. They act in an advisory capacity to City Council for annexations, rezonings, text amendments. And then of course, City Council, you have the zoning public hearing that acts on those annexations, rezonings, and text amendments. The Board of Zoning Appeals hears variances and special exceptions. State law governs all of these activities as well as administrative appeals. A variance is usually a quantifiable change in a standard, such as a setback or a height that is unable to be met due to hardship or special conditions of the land. A special exception is a use that may be appropriate in an environment but requires additional review and may have added conditions applied by the board to ensure that it's appropriate. Finally, the Design Development Review Commission, often called the Board of Architectural Review, is set out by the state to allow for an aesthetic review for either historic or urban design.
After planning and zoning review, we go into the land disturbance permit and plan review. This is where engineering reviews the stormwater, land disturbance, and floodplain. We also work with Richland County, issues the TMS, and we work with Richland County on the road names and assign street numbers. Our landscape review is done by our land development planner. If there is connection for water and sewer, it goes through our utility construction review. This is also when the board staff will confirm any approvals required by the board, or as Krista mentioned earlier. This is all the development center coordinator coordinates all these reviews. After the land disturbance approval is given, a zoning permit is then issued through the development center. And at that point, a pre-construction meeting is scheduled with the city inspectors. During this time, during construction, if there's an optional bonded plat process that we allow developers to go ahead and start construction on home sites before the infrastructure is completed, and that is through the development center. They submit a letter of credit and a subdivision agreement, something that we have tried to work with and a lot of developers do take advantage of. After the land disturbance approval, the building plan review and permit is reviewed for compliance for building, fire, and zoning codes. If the parcel is located in the floodplain manager does get involved at this time as well. It also goes through a design historic preservation review. This is all coordinated through the development center and also occurs during the can occur during the land disturbance review as well. Once construction commences, the engineering will go out and perform erosion control inspections. Our utility inspectors will be reviewing the installation of the utilities throughout the development. And if it is in the floodplain, a floodplain manager will go out and do periodic inspections, as well as the building inspectors at different intervals throughout the scope of the project. At the final project closeout, we have a record drawing checklist that must be completed. Submittal of record drawings are required, and once approved, they go to our legal after a utility deed is drafted. We also have our inspectors that will go through the final punch out items to get the development in compliance. The pressure test and bacterial analysis are performed, and if the development is in the floodplain, a final elevation certificate is required. At that time, once all of the approvals are required, engineering releases the operation and maintenance letter, and DHEC releases the final permits to operate.
Whether occupying an existing space or a newly constructed one, business requires a business license to operate in the city. Applications for new business license include sign-off from zoning, building inspection, and fire prevention. And contractors applying for permits are required to obtain and maintain a Columbia business license. With regard to the construction process, the final step prior to occupying the building is either to obtain a certificate of occupancy for new construction or a new use if it's a change of use, or it's a final card for commercial renovations. So that was our overview of the process and the folks involved. Over the past several years, there have been a number of initiatives that we've proposed and actually have gone through to continuously improve our processes. Of course, we always like to take this opportunity to remind everyone of the terrific work of our development center and our staff there in coordinating reviews and troubleshooting and problem solving as they come in. We in engineering have recently been through a business process mapping exercise to improve the flows and coordination as we have implemented new permitting and plan management software. But there's always room for improvement, and we have some other opportunities here that we'd like to discuss. The first that we're very excited about that engineering is making possible is e-review. That's part of our permitting software. And that will allow for staff to review plans in conjunction with the designer. It will allow for these concurrent reviews that you see next. So existing, we will get a set of plans, and utilities may see sewer easements, but not see the landscaping. Our landscaper reviewer will see landscaping, but not the sewer easements, not understanding that the landscaping is on top of the sewer easements. And so that can oftentimes cause for some conflict in reviewing some times that need some time loss. So we want to get all of the information on the same set of plans so that everybody has the same information and is ensuring that the review is concurrent. We already pursue concurrent reviews to a large degree, and that's what our development center actually enables. But we want to make sure that what they are seeing is the same information, and e-review will help to make that possible. We also want to ensure that we always have backup reviewers so that if someone is out, that review can still occur in a timely fashion. We all have established time for that initial review. We do not necessarily have a time for the resubmittal review, and our staff is discussing ways to establish that. It would be shorter, significantly shorter than the first review, and so that could be given out to the folks when they submit that review if necessary. We find that one thing that actually not one thing, but one aspect of the development review process that can always be improved is really these next two things is about communication. Ensuring that what is submitted is accurate and complete so that our folks have the information they need to do their review in a timely fashion. And so in order for it to make sure that it's complete, we need to put that information out in submittal requirements and checklists. We review these quite regularly, but they need to be modified just due to changing conditions. And incomplete submittals, and I know Dana and I have talked about this, sometimes our staff we would accept what were obviously incomplete submittals, trying to be thinking that was business friendly, when in fact it was going to add more time because we would have to wait for that information to come in. So ensuring that what we are getting at the front end is, again, complete and accurate will actually be better for everybody. Finally, another really great implementation that our IT folks have been working very hard on is mobile inspections. We have the iPads in testing right now so that instead of having to come into the office and work from a computer and get all of their information in and out there, they will just have their iPads in the field, be able to go out and conduct all of their inspections. Really, in essence, may not even have to come into the office, which of course during these times is increasingly important. So we thank you for this opportunity to provide this information, and we're here and available for questions.
Any questions?
I have one thing. So time-wise, Krista, what are you thinking of the implementation of your recommendations?
The e-review is currently in process. I don't want to speak for IT. I think we have.
Yeah, they've been doing a great job working through our processes. I think the only thing left is that bonded plat was getting that mapped out. And so we've been actively working on that, but it sounds like they're ready to sit down and start putting those templates into our InterGov.
So I don't want to, I mean, I'm hopeful that within 3 months we could have that done, but I want to confirm that with those folks.
Yeah, and engineering had a workshop last November where we met with engineers and developers, just trying to, we streamlined our approval letter, and we have outward facing GIS that thankfully Sungjun has set up for those that want they have to create an account, of course, for security purposes, but that's been well received by the developers and engineers. We kind of went through a top 10, what things are missed, like Krista mentioned, a lot of things are submitted to get in the docket, but yet they're not complete. So it spends a lot of our reviewers' times trying to mark it up. So we put a template of kind of what your record drawing should look like. So, and we have open dialogue pretty regularly with developers. If they have ideas, they typically do like to share those.
With regard to the, so also for the time for submittal reviews, I mean, I think we'll have that within we'll have all of that established, as well as, and the checklist and requirements is a rolling. We consistently have to look at those. Incomplete submittals, I know engineering has already implemented that in part of their process. We do largely, but we need to actually we just need to get better about it, quite frankly. And it comes from a place of trying to be business friendly, but I think we stub our toe a bit.
Thank you.
I've noticed a difference in I guess the reactions to a number of people who are going through the process. I think, and my measurement has been the number of calls or differences of opinions that I get calls about, and that has but that has essentially leveled off. I do recall when we went through the streamlining process, and I think that had a lot to do with it also. So it sounds like you guys are doing a good job with that. And I'm certain that, the changes you've made regarding the incomplete submittals, I think that's really cut down on the timelines for reaching the end product on that. And again, I've always measured that by the phone calls we get, the number of complaints, and I think a couple of times, Dana, for example, we've been out in the field together, and so there's appears to be some improvements in that, or some satisfaction with where we're headed.
Great.
So I think we can pat you guys on the back for that.
Thanks.
Daniel or Will?
First of all, thank y'all very much for your time and putting this forth. And I think one of the exercises that Krista and them have done is they've looked at some different timelines and reviews of projects. And one of the things first of all, I want to say that I've had more compliments from the business community about Mr. Burnett's coordination in the office, and I want to note that has been very helpful for folks. I think the other thing that I'm real interested in is taking a look at how do we create a more streamlined process for smaller projects. And if you use the Beltline pizza project that y'all did a review on, it's a $13,000 build out, 1,500 square feet, very small building, but 2 months of process time. And, granted, we had I think y'all came up with about 13 hours of direct contact. I don't know how much indirect, but how do we whittle that down for smaller projects so that these type of things can get built out and move quicker, because the surrounding communities are doing that type of process. And so that's a challenge I think we ought to look at. And I think some of it stems, at least some of the feedback that I'm hearing from different folks, is that, there's some inhibitors in our ordinances. And I think the challenge I have for you, Krista and Dana and everybody else is, let's utilize the folks on the front line. Hey. is trying to utilize our staff and take those things that come up that seem to be common challenges and things that, for smaller projects or more common projects that unfortunately the ordinances that have been in place kind of prohibit, because I think giving our staff more autonomy on some of these smaller projects will help speed through the process and eliminate, there's just, we're spending a lot, there's a lot of time frame in there. And I think it's just because the way we're set up, not so much that it's sitting on people's desks. And so I think, that is my challenge for you guys to take a look at is, poll the staff and everybody, hey, what things are slowing us down, and use these different examples, because we want to be competitive with our neighbors. That we are at a disadvantage at this point on a tax structure, but we ought to be able to beat them with a process because we have the talent here in the city to do it. So, that would be my challenge to you guys.
Mr. Davis, if I might, to Mr. Rickman's point, I think Missy may have a new addition to introduce that I hope is going to help with the very points that Mr. Rickman is making. Missy, do you want to introduce Gregory?
Absolutely. So
now we've got two Gregorys. We have two of everybody, so I don't know if we're going to go Greg or Gregory, but
that's right. So
Greg.
Wait a second.
Okay.
I'm myself twice, Teresa.
Okay.
So we have filled the business liaison position. This has been a position we've talked about for quite some time. And I know staff is really excited. Staff from all of the departments and management is excited to have this position filled. Greg Williams, we're going to call him Greg, not Gregory, to try to minimize confusion. But Greg Williams is our Deputy Business License Administrator. On October 12th, he will be our business liaison. He is in the room, he's taking notes, and he's ready to start working in this capacity. And we're really excited about the opportunity, and we intend for him to work with all of the departments involved in the development process as well as the community. So I've already got a list of projects for him to look at, for developers for him to talk to, and I'm sure you all do as well. So if you want to shoot that to me, Jan's going to let us use him a little bit until October 12th, but on October 12th, we want him to hit the ground running and really get his feet wet and help us navigate how to streamline processes and how to make sure that he's aware of all the opportunities to make it as easy as possible for our businesses to do work in the city.
Welcome on board, Greg. I guess it's.
I don't think he can hear us.
Okay. Will you?
Yes, Councilman Davis, appreciate it. Dana and Krista, thanks so much for pulling this review together. I think it's important for residents, business owners, and developers to realize all the departments that go into to pushing city functions forward in the development world. I had a few questions for you. Krista, can you comment on, do you think we do a good job of promoting the pre-application meeting? Because I completely agree with you. That would get rid of a lot of headaches down the scheduling road if we could get people engaged in that first step. Can you comment on kind of where we were with that and where you'd like to go and how we get there?
Certainly. I think once they touch the city and any of our staff, it's very well promoted. I think it's highly encouraged by most of our folks. It's trying to get to the people who have not maybe made contact with the city yet, that we could work to improve that message going forward. And Greg will probably be a terrific liaison for us for that. And getting, because it helps not only the city, but the developer. So my answer would be, once they're in contact with the city, it's promoted highly, but we need to find a way to get the word out earlier. I mean, it's on our website, that we recommend it. So if you come to the website, it's there, but we could work on making it more visible to the development community.
Yeah, and I think an education piece to architects, engineers, environmental consultants, saying, please encourage clients, developers to set that pre-application meeting up would be wonderful.
Yeah.
So if we could reach out through them.
Absolutely. Yeah, those who work with the city regularly, they just call as a matter of course to set one up. So once you're in the system, it does work well. But that's a good idea.
Wonderful, wonderful. Can you comment on Mr. Williams's future role? I appreciate y'all saving that announcement for this meeting. That was well played. It's wonderful to hear that role has been filled. And so what liberties what liberties will he be given to push permitting through the various departments within the city?
So Teresa, do you want to take that or you want me to respond?
You can go ahead. I can fill in any gaps that I would like to see happen.
So Councilman Brennan, this is a new position that we're creating with the intention of streamlining processes and helping developers and businesses navigate. So he will be touching development services, engineering, Office of Business Opportunity, economic development, fire department, any area, business license, any area of the city that's involved in the process, we want him to be very knowledgeable about, very aware of, so that he can then help navigate projects through. He would be the point of contact if a developer had a question about where their project stands in the process. He would be the logical point of contact. He's not going to be doing the work for the departments though. So part of his challenge, I would say, in the first 6 to 12 months is really understanding how the projects flow through the process and helping us navigate opportunities for improvement. He's going to be coming in. He has a complete knowledge of the business license process, which in itself gives him some knowledge of how other departments play a role, but he will really be coming in learning part of what other departments do, which gives you a unique perspective to see some areas of opportunity that maybe the people that do it every day don't recognize. So I know he's very enthusiastic and very excited. He will have an office both at City Hall so that he's interacting with me and Jeff and Teresa and Pam and Henry and Clint on a regular basis, but also down at Washington Square and eventually Municipal Complex, so that he's very available to the business community. So we're working through all those details, and y'all will certainly have an opportunity to share some of your insight with them and some of the areas that you believe we can make improvements on. So I'm trying before October 12th to have a full list, and we'll be sending him some of the dialogue we've had over the last 12 to 24 months about different projects that cause frustration, or from different developers who felt like it was hard to get through our system. And we hear that sometimes, so I don't want to negate that. We also hear many times from developers that work all across the country that we're fairly easy compared to other cities, but we certainly want to be the easiest government to work with in the entire area. So we want to make sure we're following our codes and ordinances and protecting the public, but we also want it to be a very easy, friendly process. So that's what he's going to add to it. Any insight y'all want to give him right now? He's taking notes and he's listening.
I think the one thing, Missy, you nailed it, Mr. Brennan, and to all of your points you've made today, is Greg really, in his interview, promoted being solutions oriented, and I think that's what I was looking to hear. And it's going to require that our partners throughout the city also understand what that means in order for him to be successful in doing that. So I think, as Missy stated, over the next weeks, he's going to be reestablishing and building up the relationships he already has as a city employee, of course, in a very critical area like business license. So he knows how to navigate the different areas, but he'll be doing that in a different way. Hopefully with that autonomy that y'all have spoken about.
Wonderful. And just to echo Councilman Rickman, the review periods and getting our hands around that, I think would be a wonderful place for Mr. Williams to hop in and give us feedback on staffing levels, staffing efficiencies. So I appreciate that so much and look forward to Mr. Williams figuring it out. One last question, and I'll stop, Councilman Davis. Krista, e-review. I've seen e-review in other municipalities. What can you explain that? And what is the change that would have to be made for our staff interaction on an IT level? And then also, how does that? I feel like that would be a natural streamlining access point as well.
Erica, do you have us on?
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, we will not be the IT people. So with regard to the IT infrastructure, that is already in place with our EnerGov solution. So it is an additional module for the EnerGov solution. And we will have to have larger displays, obviously, so our folks can see the plans, which we have just received delivery of a few of those. But I have not worked with it directly, but my understanding is you can have some real-time interaction with the designers while looking at the same set of plans, so that you can be circling and saying, how about this? What's going on over here? Additionally, I believe through the PDF software, it can highlight changes that were made from one version to the next. So it helps the reviewers identify those kinds of changes that have been made. So we're really fortunate that IT's really already set us up to make the implementation fairly easy. With COVID, we had to implement our online permitting a little quicker than we had anticipated, but staff stepped up and were able to do that. So we're already accepting those plans online. So that will be somewhat of a seamless process too. So we're really looking forward to it. Folks are pretty excited about the possibilities.
Is that 3D modeling?
No, I do not believe it is. It's just it's through a PDF. It uses Bluebeam, PDF reviewer.
Perfect. Thanks so much, y'all.
Okay, I think that's it. Next is Melissa.
Yes, sir. This will be
Good morning.
Go ahead, Teresa, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, sir, no problem. I was just going to read into the record the next item, an update on small minority woman-owned business enterprise outreach and inclusion efforts by Ms. Melissa Lindler from the Office of Business Opportunities, our director. And we wanted to come back. I think this is probably an ongoing discussion from the last committee meeting. Noted, Mr. Davis, you all had asked for an update in 45 days. So we're right around that time frame. And obviously this will be an ongoing discussion. Melissa.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Good morning, Council. How's everybody doing today?
Great, thank you.
As Ms. Wilson, thank you. As Ms. Wilson stated, this is an ongoing process internally, making sure that we're doing all that we can as a city for providing different outreach and inclusion of our small minority and women-owned business enterprises. Today, what we would like to discuss with you is to give you an overview of where we are with the disparity study. Also, some things that we're doing internally in regards to our CDBE goal setting methodology and outreach to our local DBE contractors, and the review of good faith efforts that's ongoing within the city, not only within OBO, but also with Columbia Water, as well as procurement. And then the last thing we'll talk about is the good faith efforts being determined in advance of bid opening. One thing in regards to the disparity study, again, we're working very closely with the Office of Procurement and Contracts. We have established some templates internally on our T drive, but where we're looking at other cities and what they've done with their disparity studies and their RFPs. So we're looking at those, but we're also looking internally at the previous study that was done in 2004 and completed in 2006, and reviewing the status of the recommendations from that older study. And I'm happy to say that we've actually implemented a number of those recommendations. So we will share that with you exactly where we are with the recommendations on the next update that we give to this committee. Now, the next stage, or the initial stage of the disparity study, will be the disparity study analysis and development. And we actually did this last time. We had a sole source. And this time we can either do a sole source, or we can actually do a request for qualifications in order to secure the consultant that will help us with this process. One positive thing about using a sole source and maybe even using someone that we've used before is that they're familiar with the city, they're familiar with our programs, they're familiar with how we collect information, and they're familiar with the staff. At least those who are still here from 2006. The other piece, doing a request for qualifications, casting that net out there, understanding that this is still a very specialized area. You have a very limited number of people that have the specialty and the capacity to do this work for this initial stage. But you do get a new set of ideas if you don't actually use someone that's worked with the city before. But it may take a little longer to actually get that person in place doing an RFQ. Sole source, we have some ideas about people that we could utilize versus the request for qualifications, which means that we may get a number of different people submitting, but understanding that the pool is so narrow that we really won't get that many responses for this part of the disparity study. So under this initial stage, the different components would be reviewing our small women, minority-owned business enterprises, current programs that we have in place and policies, and looking at opportunities to further engage that target population in our programs and how do we increase participation. So that's one piece of this initial stage. The next piece is providing technical assistance in the development of the scope of work for the actual disparity study itself, the RFP, schedules and processes for soliciting proposals, and conducting an independent review of proposals once submitted in response to the RFP. They would also provide a review of the study to include recommendations for improvements and modifications. This is again after the study has been completed, and engage the community with the study in providing the feedback from the community, or helping them understand the study and the findings of the study, and getting recommendations from the community through community forums and public hearings. Now, once this initial stage is done and we decide, or we decide exactly how we're going to move forward, Ms. Wilson and her team, her leadership team, either through a sole source or request for qualifications, the next stage is actually to submit the request to the Executive Management Committee for their final approval. In regards to our CDBE goal setting methodology and outreach to local DBE contractors, after our last meeting, we actually met with Columbia Water, legal, and procurement to really look at the methodology that we use in collecting our CDB information and doing our goals. And what we actually are looking at, we're reviewing the goal setting processes, and we made modifications to our internal CDBE project form that we use in OBO that the staff use to actually calculate those percentages. One is to make sure that we have a listing of all projects, all areas of a project from Columbia Water, but we also are becoming more familiar with those specialized areas of work to be performed by the prime or are identified, so that we're not listing or assigning goals to different areas of a project where we know we do not currently have DBE participation. So those are some modifications that we're making to our goals when we're actually calculating these percentages to make sure they're reachable, they're logical, and that we do have CDBEs and DBEs that can perform the work. We've also looked at the possibility of reaching out to our local DBE contractors to better understand their interests and offerings. One problem that we have when our vendors register, our contractors register in our eBid system, they tend to just list all the areas that they can actually do. And sometimes it's not those areas that they can perform. So what we're going to do, and what we have been doing, is when we have questions about the capacity of a DBE to actually perform in certain areas, we are actually reaching out to those DBEs. This is before the project actually goes out for bid. But while we're calculating the formula, we reach out to those local DBE contractors and our CDBEs to make sure we have a better understanding of what their capacity is and that they can actually perform in certain areas of a project. And as always, increased communication between both OBO and Columbia Water staff. It seems like COVID has forced us all to communicate more. And it's actually, that's one of the better things I think about COVID, is that we're forced to work together even more so. Even though we can't meet face to face, we are still making strides in making sure that we're looking at our programs, we're revising our programs, but we're reaching out across departments when we're looking at how can we make modifications as we move forward. So by doing this, we believe that our CDBE goal setting is better. It's more reachable, and we also have more of an open line of communication with Columbia Water and an understanding of those projects and exactly what is needed for different projects that they're working on before they go out for bid. Another piece of this modification or evaluation that we're doing of our Columbia Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program is our good faith efforts. Council will be asked to look at and review our current CDBE policy that was adopted in November 2016 this year to either extend it or rescind it. We're hoping that with these modifications that we're making to the CDBE program, we will actually continue to implement this program, strengthening the good faith efforts, making sure that we give contractors a better understanding of how to get DBE or CDBE participation. So again, working with Columbia Water, Office of Procurement and Contracts, and legal to strengthen this language is definitely needed, and to make sure that it's more current in terms of technology, utilizing electronic communications in terms of reaching DBE and CDBEs that may have an interest in participating in programs, but streamlining the process to make sure it's not only understandable, but it also doesn't prolong or increase the amount of time that a contractor has to spend in making sure that they're doing the necessary outreach to increase DBE participation on projects. And as for increase internal and external understanding of the CDBE program and its purpose is certainly something that's needed, not only within our City of Columbia staff, but also externally with our contractors. So we're going to make every effort possible through our procurement office, OBO, and Columbia Water to make sure that people understand the program, doing more webinars about exactly what not only our CDBE program is, but also other programs like our LBE program, our MPP program. So by increasing understanding of these different compliance programs and sending a unified message out there, what the purpose and intent of these programs are, we think that there will also be more attempts at our contractors to make sure they're reaching those goals that we place on projects in terms of CDBE participation. Additionally, we also want to look at the possibility of administrative review of good faith efforts by internal committee made of leadership regarding CDBE waiver requests that are made when a project or participation is not achieved on a specific project. So adding that different layer in there, it also involves more than just one department and their committee. We have, even though we have a CDBE review committee that looks at those things, but it also adds a layer of leadership in there to make sure that we're being fair, we're being concise, and we're being considerate of all efforts that are made by a contractor in terms of reaching the CDBE goal that we place on a project. Another piece that was mentioned last time by Sandra in her PowerPoint was determining in advance of a bid opening when the good faith effort has been met. Right now, the good faith effort is examined after the bid opens. What we're trying to do is make sure that we do that prior to that bid opening to make sure that it's not part of that procurement process, it's separate. So again, we're working internally to assess appropriate time needed to determine the CDBE, GFE, or good faith efforts compliance in advance of bid opening, looking at the time needed by OBO's team and the review committee to look at the good faith efforts that were made on a project and determine compliance, and the time also needed if someone does not receive a waiver, if it's not granted, the appeals process. And how does that look? So those are some things that we're working through internally in regards to that. And then we're also looking at establishing a committee of local contractors and business partners to assist with the procedure in determining CDBE good faith efforts compliance in advance of bid opening, making sure that they have the time that they need to calculate their totals and secure the necessary CDBE and DBE participation. And by participating, they're not actually helping us set this policy, but at least they feel like they have a better understanding of the program. Again, educating them exactly what those components are, but also the importance of meeting the CDBE goal placed on projects. So this is something that we're also working, again, internally with Columbia Water as well as procurement to make these modifications to our program. Any questions?
That's great. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Mr. Rickman.
Melissa, just for further clarification, what is the timeline for the disparity study RFP?
For
And I do have
the
a
request
question
for
on that. I forgot.
I'm
No,
sorry.
go ahead.
This
Answer that. I might have a follow-up question to that.
Okay, so if we actually do a sole source, that will not take us long. We have some possible candidates that we probably need to look at and consider. Once we actually have that person in place, they will help us develop that RFP to put out for the disparity study. That may take about three to 6 months, and the disparity study itself will take at least a year to complete, and it could take longer than that given COVID and the ability to collect the information and the data that they need, but also to do the research that's necessary remotely with whoever we actually use. So we're looking at still about a good year and a half before it's actually done. But it could, again, take up to 2 years like it did before. But again, with COVID, it's delaying a lot of things.
So Melissa, that was my question, I guess, about the sole source. So because you had mentioned particularly, maybe somebody we worked with before, I'd love for us to expand because there are, just different teams that have different expertise, but would we be able, I guess tell me the sole source process, and you mentioned there's some folks we could look at. Those aren't necessarily folks we worked with before, but because of their expertise legally, we could sole source with them, or how does that work?
And,
It would.
and Melissa, real quick before you jump in, it may be that Sandra needs to answer the sole source process.
Okay.
'Cause she's really managing that.
Okay, is she on the call?
I think she is. I think Jeff told me she was. Sandra, are you there?
Okay. In terms of availability, Councilwoman Devine, we do have, there are a number of people with the capacity to do that initial stage of this process. Again, it's limited, but that would be up to procurement in terms of the sole source and whether or not we go that route or not.
I think you need to make a distinction, Melissa, between when you're saying this initial phase versus who would actually be, I mean, we would be doing an RFQ for the actual disparity study vendor. So make sure you're making that distinction between what you're saying is an initial phase of
Okay.
a contractor helping with that may be a sole source piece, but for the actual disparity study, we would put out an RFQ, correct?
That is correct. So
Okay.
the
That's
initial,
what I was asking about was the actual study. So that would not be, so I mean, it's not like we can just say, oh, this is a
No,
great company and
no.
go contract with them. We have
Correct.
to do RFQ.
correct. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sorry about the confusion.
Not the initial phase, though, that you're referencing, Melissa.
That is the initial phase, is having a consultant come in to help us actually put together that RFQ for the actual disparity study itself. That person would also help us look at our programs internally, look at the policies that we have in place internally, look at any gaps that we may have in our data collection, and in our policies and our programs that may be preventing certain participation from different target groups. So that's a different part of it. So that's one person that's helping us actually develop that RFP. So the sole source would be for that person to help us come in, that's familiar with the city, that person. That's what we would do. That's a very specialized area. It's very intense work. We had one person, he did a very good job, I think. I wasn't here, but looking at the outcome and the disparity study that was done, they're familiar with the city, they're familiar with what our policies and programs are, but they're also amazed because they contacted us late, I want to say last year, about how much progress we've made in meeting those recommendations of the study. So they've been keeping up, that person specifically, the initial consultant that we used to help us develop our our RFP for the actual disparity study. That is a different person than the person that's actually going to do the disparity study itself. Okay. Does that make sense?
Right.
But they're helping us put everything together to get that done.
The role that Franklin had before is
correct.
What we're talking about.
Correct.
And then the company who actually performed it would go through our RFQ process.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you have more companies out there that have the capacity to do the study than you do to do this initial phase. That would require a little more specialized skill set.
Daniel, Will, questions? I've got one. We've implemented some recommendations from the initial study we did. Does that impact the length of, will that impact the length of time for an additional study, or impact the selection process?
It should not. What they're going to have to do, though, is still look at those recommendations. It's still going to be research based. which means they're still going to have to dive in and look at all of our policies and our programs. And even with the recommendations that we've implemented, looking at the actual programs and policies that have been implemented as well to see if there are any gaps there that need to be addressed. So it could take just as long. I think it's a good starting point to help us look at what we've done, and as well as look at those recommendations that we were not able to do, maybe because we didn't have the right technology or our capacity in place to do it. But those are some things that consultant could help us do.
Let's talk a little more about the good faith effort process. And I'm hearing the differences that we're looking at determining the good faith efforts before bids are open.
Correct.
What do you really see as a timeline for doing that? I just, again, based on feedback we've been getting over the years, and I think anything we can do to minimize any kind of differences of opinion on how that process goes, the better off we would be. So is that going to be a long process
that's what we're doing? Yes, sir. That's what we're doing right now. We've had internal discussions with procurement. Again, we definitely do not want to interfere with the procurement piece of this, making sure that we are staying away from looking at and determining the good faith efforts before it even goes to bid opening. Timing is something that we're not certain of yet. That's why we wanted to put together a local committee of contractors and look at what type of time they may need to meet their good faith effort, so we can take that in consideration as we're putting and making the revisions to what the program that we have in place now. We're not sure. And also the extra piece of it, the administrative piece, to administrative oversight with someone where the good faith committee doesn't grant a waiver because they had failed to meet the good faith effort in meeting the goal. But at what point do we allow them a waiver or allow them the administrative appealing process to appeal the decision of not getting their waiver? So those are some things that we're working on. And again, we want to make sure that the contractors, they're not helping us decide exactly how we do it, but we want to have a clear understanding of how much time they need to meet the good faith effort. And we can actually make that a part of our policy as we're working through the good faith effort modifications.
A question, one of the expected or preferred outcomes of where we are now and what we're looking at and how we're trying to make sure that the process run smoothly and meet the needs of the city and the community. The bottom line appears to be that there's still a shortage, for whatever reason, of some women and small minority businesses that are able to participate, not because they're not in the business, or the information is that they just don't qualify because of skills. One, have we, or are we thinking about some way to help small businesses, minority businesses in particular, to develop those skills, either through the mentoring process? That's, we're doing the best we can with that, but there's still a lack of skills in the immediate community. Not correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And one thing that one thing that we are looking at is the training that we did last year for the waterline certification training, looking at those applicants and doing something else with them to move them closer to the process of actually getting tested to receive their licensing, waterline license. So that's one piece. So we have that in the works. The other thing is doing a better job at putting it out there of exactly what we have to offer here at the City of Columbia. Again, a lot of people are just not aware of our programs. So I think we have a lot of qualified DBEs that are out there, and they may be working on other projects in other areas throughout our eight county CSA, but they don't know that we have these programs here. So one thing is about just educating people or educating these companies that we have these programs and we have these opportunities for participation. Now, in terms of building the skill set, that's something that we're trying to work with Columbia Water to see if there's a way for us maybe to work with one of our technical schools to help build that pool that you're referring to. Some people have the qualifications, or some people have the skill set, but they may not have the necessary qualifications or licensing needed in order to go after some of these projects or in order to participate on some of these projects. So it's also about making sure that they're aware of those opportunities too. You know, you may have the skill set, but what about getting you licensed to perform this? And most of them are doing the work, they just don't have the proper credentials to do it.
Yes, so, yeah, that's kind of where my thought process is. You know, in addition to the training we do, I'm just trying to figure out how could we help develop those skill sets and qualifications through, you're right, tech, or maybe the university, because we all recognize and accept the fact that is a big challenge.
Yes,
so
sir.
Are we kind of really thinking out of the box on that? And how do we get to that point where we've increased the qualifications, we've increased the skill sets, and we've kind of helped along the process of more participation in contracts?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have had conversations with Midlands Tech. USD have not reached out to yet, but we certainly can do that. But I know that Tech has those programs already in place. Okay. Community Development has also utilized them in they did a program with them for the asbestos training. So we have that partnership in place. It's just narrowing down exactly what qualifications we're trying to work on building their capacity in. Yes, sir, but it is underway.
Yeah, I understand. Sounds like y'all are on the right track and looking at the key elements of getting us to the goal. So appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Will, Tamika, Daniel?
I'm good. I have a question about agenda item 1 whenever you're done with item 2, Councilman Davis.
I think we're done.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to ask for follow-up purposes from agenda item 1. Can staff over the next 60 days or so, as we dig into operation and efficiencies, please suggest the best metrics for us to track these changes, compare where we've been to the new efficiencies we're finding, so we can tell residents, business owners, developers that we are committed, and here's how we're doing it, and here's our efforts. If that could be provided as we move forward.
Certainly, we'll look into that, sir.
Great, thank you so much.
Mr. Davis, I was going to ask Melissa to also provide any information she currently has. I know the date is set for the Women's Empowerment virtual event. I've been hearing, starting to get some questions and interest because of radio advertisement. Melissa, is that something that you want to share with the council?
Sure. We actually have been working with the Big DM number of years now in hosting or being a partner with hosting the Women's Empowerment Conference. And because of COVID, there was concern, well, how do we still have the same type of impact? How do we still do what we've been doing over the last 15 years, I think, in doing this event where you have 3,000 to 4,000 women come out on one weekend, on one Saturday to participate. So what they decided to do is, and again, we said we can't participate or be a partner if it's just about entertainment. So that was a concern. And they said, well, no, it's going to be about advocacy. It's going to be about empowering, and it's going to be about, helping these women expand, especially the business owners, look at how do you pivot in this moment of crisis that we're all living in. What resources do you need? What resources are available to you? And that's where we come in. We will have a session there. It's going to be about 30 minutes to an hour to talk about, business development, women-owned business development during crisis, and leadership, and working together. Maybe it's joint ventures. Maybe you don't do things just by yourself anymore. Maybe this is the time to look at partnering and working with others to do what you do. Looking at e-commerce. Those are some things that we want to bring to them and shed light on. So this is not just, and they do have different people that are going to be there, different entertainers that will be there, as they do every year, but it will also be about information sharing, empowerment, leadership, and there certainly is a business development component in terms of how do you maintain, sustain during this crisis. So that's what we're working on doing. Yes, ma'am.
Any comments? I've seen a number of promotions on it. I think it's going to be good.
And we're not doing it at the same level as before. I wanted to also share that. I'm sorry. I want to say about costs. The cost is not as it has been before. I think before we've done it at maybe 15,000. We're only looking at maybe 5,000 this year. And that's to help with the technology and delivering and making sure that we reach as many people as we can. And we also have some other ads that will be a part of that are separate from women empowerment that will also encompass the funding that they've requested in terms of helping us spread the word about our Economic Development Administration new evolving loan fund. So that will also be a component of this as well. But in addition to that one day on October 17th, we'll also have other opportunities to talk about the new loan and how do you access those funds.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed, I think a number of people we interact with have noticed that we don't appear to have taken our feet off the pedal when it comes to filling these gaps and reaching some of the goals that we've had on the table all along. I contend that what we're doing is very important now in terms of getting a perspective on where the city is with small businesses, because those that have been experiencing challenges before the virus, they're really between a rock and a hard place now. And as much as we can do to help them get through this, then I think we would have fewer businesses just falling off the face of the earth. Because a number of them, if they don't get through these challenges, and if we, I think, can do a better job, can continue to do what we're doing to help them sustain and develop skills for post-pandemic, then we can do that, they'll survive. Because we all know that a number are not going to survive because of
yes, sir,
where they are now. And I think that will really be a feather in our cap as a city, that our numbers look good in terms of businesses that survive as opposed to those that don't survive. A lot of it is not under our control anyway, but I think the more we can contribute to sustaining those that are here now and minimize the going out of business numbers, we'll be fine.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Daniel, you agree with that?
I agree with you. I appreciate it. Appreciate you stating it out.
So I think everybody, I think we've gone through a number of things that shows that we haven't taken our foot off the pedal at all. You know, when even the development process, you know, it really represents progress we're making. We're making it a whole lot easier for folks to come and do business with us, and that's important. So if we can kind of stay where we are and continue as a team and keep our eyes on the goal, we'll be fine as a city. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy, but at the end of the day, our efforts are going to really reflect what we are and where we've been and just how good we are as a city. And I don't want to see any business not make it, but the reality is something that we have no control over. But we're growing, development is happening. And I think as we continue to look at these little pockets in the city also, where development really needs to happen, we'll be fine. And then we can be partners with everybody.
Mr. Davis, I think you're right, and the council should really be commended on the efforts that you all have made. I mean, really right out of the gate from when COVID first started and allocating funds that go directly to benefit small businesses, minority businesses, nonprofits. I was on at a meeting this morning on a call, and typically the manager and the county administrators in the Midlands report out. And I was just thinking to myself, as I was listening to some of the reports out in one of our neighboring communities about how everything is booming and, you know, nothing's really changed and everything is great, which is good in the grand scheme of things for our neighboring partners and communities. But at the same time, I didn't hear as much about the efforts of local municipalities and counties really doing the hard work and stepping out to find funding and continue to search for funding and utilize our federal funds the little bit, you know, that we're able to get. And so I do think that it doesn't always go, you know, we don't get recognized, not looking for recognition, but I do think those are hard things for the policymakers to do. And you all have done that and stepped up and continue to push us as staff to streamline our processes and make it easier and more accessible for businesses when they really needed it. So I understand sometimes neighboring communities have different numbers than we do or we've had when it comes to COVID, but the numbers in Richland County have stayed where they are, and sometimes the city has been bear the brunt of how to make sure people are still getting what they need from a service delivery standpoint. So you know, it's not a popular thing to say or acknowledge, but it's the truth. And I'm really proud of what we've continued to try to do. Thank y'all for leading in that regard.
Thanks. I got to drop off, y'all.
I've got another one I've got to go to, but I think we've been educated today and look forward to our continuing education through staff, and we'll set the next meeting.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
every-
Mr. Davis, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Vine. Appreciate y'all.
Thanks to everyone.
Thanks, committee members. Thank y'all. Out.